We're live. My screen just said we're live. So hello, everybody. I'm Otto Penzler. This is the Mysterious Bookshop. We're doing this from my lavish office in the basement of the bookshop. And obviously, I'm here tonight with one of my favorite authors of recent discovery, Tom Mead. Tom writes in my, I would have to say, in the mystery world. I have two favorite subgenres. One is biblio-mysteries. I've written extensively about them. I collected them and so on, as regular followers of the bookshop know. And the other is locked room mysteries. I've done a very, very big anthology of them. And I collected those two, of course, and talk about them with great pleasure. And Tom sent a manuscript. Forgive me, Tom. I'm going to rattle on just for a minute and then largely show that.
By all means,
over
absolutely. No, go for it.
But I edit a series or I'm the series editor of a series of books called the Best Mysteries. The Mysterious Bookshop presents the best mystery stories of the year, and in 2021. I had 20 stories that were really terrific. One of them was by Tom. I think it was in Ellery Queen magazine, wasn't it, Tom?
It was in an anthology that was published over here in the UK by Flame Tree Press.
Oh, that's right. It comes back to me now. 2 years ago is so long now. Yes, and I loved the story, and it was in the book. And then Tom sent a letter to say, would it be inappropriate for me to send you a manuscript of a novel that I've written? And I said, no, not inappropriate at all. It would be a delight. And it was Death and the Conjurer, his first novel. And I loved it so much that I bought it and published it. And we've had very good success with it. We had a second printing of that book. It's now out in paperback. And it introduced this wonderful character who is a former stage magician named Spector. And in the tradition, I won't say commonly, but in the tradition of Golden Age mysteries, it is not uncommon. It is quite common, in fact, to have the police come and be baffled, and they call on an associate, a friend, a private detective, an amateur detective who they can get some help from. And here we have Scotland Yard Inspector, who comes and is totally baffled and calls his friend, the retired magician, to come and solve these impossible crimes. And totally captivated by that book. Set in London in the 1930s. So it has everything that you would want from the great Golden Age writers of that era. And it's such a hard subgenre in which to work. They're so difficult to do, to set up an impossible crime that is absolutely riveting, where you want to know, you have to know, but realize it's impossible, could never have happened. And then the detective comes in and does the rest. How did you ever manage to do this, Tom, and figuring out how to do both ends, like set up this great impossible crime and then solve it in a reasonable, believable way?
Well, as you can probably imagine, I am somebody who is fascinated by stage magic, the history of stage magic, and the practice of stage illusions, and the not only the gimmicks and the clever devices, but also the psychological aspect, as in the way that a trick works on an audience, how magicians and illusionists exploit the gaps in our perception, and to me that is also at the heart of mystery writing, the best mystery writing, the puzzle mysteries that I love from the Golden Age. So when it comes to constructing a mystery plot, I'm often drawn back to the non-fiction work about the history of magic, and also more recent studies of how magic works on the brain, how the brain can be tricked, and how the brain tricks itself. Because this is something that magicians know about, but also the great mystery writers that I love, like John Dixon Carr, Ellery Queen, and all the greats of the Golden Age.
I'll tell just a little anecdote, if I may, that is not about a Golden Age writer, but exactly what you were talking about, how your perceptions can be so fooled. I was friends with a man named Walter B. Gibson, who became more famous as Maxwell Grant, the creator of the Shadow. And it was at a BoucherCon that I was running in New York, BoucherCon number 8. And I asked him to do a thing talking about the pulp magazines, the pulp era, and the other half talking about magicians, because he was a ghostwriter for Dunninger and Thurston and Houdini and several other writers. And he said, "Do you want me to do a trick?" And I said, "Yeah, that's a great bonus," because he also was a stage magician. And so he was about 80 or 81 at the time, and he was on stage, and he showed a handkerchief, a white handkerchief, and then did something with his other hand when he was slipping his handkerchief into his pocket and left part of it hanging out. And you know that the whole audience was sitting there saying, "Oh, this poor old guy. He tried to hide the handkerchief, but he left some of it hanging out." And of course, the whole illusion was everybody was looking at the handkerchief, and it had nothing to do with the trick.
Brilliant. That is just the sort of thing. That's a perfect example, because when I'm thinking about Golden Age detective fiction, obviously there are certain preconceptions that we have going in, certain character types, certain motifs and themes that we know as readers are going to crop up. And to me, that is very fertile ground for constructing an illusion by playing on those perceptions, and having some fun with them, taking them in a direction that the reader won't necessarily anticipate. Like, for instance, well, I won't say too much, but I think it's a great thing to respect the reader's knowledge and understanding of the genre, and not to underestimate their cleverness in keeping up with the clues and things that you are planting, but at the same time to use that and to create a kind of double bluff, if you like, so that you can never, as a reader, know exactly whether you've stumbled across some cleverly planted clue, or if you're looking, like you say, exactly where the magician wants you to be looking.
The famous red herring.
Exactly.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And I know that your great affection is for John Dixon Carr. In fact, dedicated Death of a Conjurer to John Dixon Carr, who was, by every measure and every account, any reasonable person would say he was the greatest constructor of impossible crimes and locked room mysteries who ever lived. But you also are walking in the footsteps of Clayton Rawson, who created the Great Merlini. There are 5 books about the Great Merlini, 4 novels and a short story collection. And he was a magician, as was, of course, the Great Merlini. With a name like the Great Merlini, you better be a magician, right?
Absolutely, yes. Clayton Rawson is somebody I admire very much. Another name that I should mention is Henning Nelms, aka Hake Talbot, author of Rim of the Pit, which I know is I don't know if it's out yet, but it's being reissued, I think, by American Mystery Classics.
Yeah, we're publishing it, and it is due shortly.
Ah, fabulous. Well,
Yeah.
that's a terrific book. But Henning Nelms, he wrote a brilliant non-fiction work about magic, which was called Magic and Showmanship, and that's a book that I really find myself coming back to frequently because I mean, as I mentioned already about the psychology of audiences and how you exploit those gaps in perception, as well as offering practical tips for sleight of hand. The book has got some very, very razor sharp observations about audiences. And again, I find it fascinating to extrapolate that knowledge that Henning Nelms shares in that great book, and to play with it in the field of the murder mystery, because of course that's what he was doing with Rim of the Pit, which is a book that's really reads almost, it's almost like a kind of literary magic show. It's a string of brilliant illusions, but coupled with the atmosphere of the macabre and the weirdness, the almost a sense of the surreal, which is something that I also enjoy in impossible crime stories.
The my longtime friend Rupert Holmes, who just had a book on the bestseller list, and who wrote The Mystery of Edwin Drood, the Broadway musical, which was hugely successful, and I think plays every night of the year someplace. He wrote, and he was a great fan of Locked Room Mysteries and Golden Age Mysteries. Ellery Queen, John Dixon Carr are his two favorite writers in the world. And so I thought he would be the right person to write the introduction to Rim of the Pit. And he wrote a beautiful and perceptive introduction to that book.
Yeah,
So
it's a great book. I'm pleased that it's getting a reissue. It certainly deserves one. Um, but to go back to Clayton Rawson, obviously his detective character is, as you say, Merlini, the professional magician. So inevitably, Rawson was somebody who was a big influence on the writing that I did when I was first coming up with the character of Spector as the kind of amateur sleuth, as you said in your introduction, that kind of great fictional archetype who's called in by a baffled Scotland Yard. Um, but this second book, the Murder Wheel, um, it delves a bit deeper into the if you like the world of stage magic, the kind of backstage world of professional illusionists in a way that the first book didn't as much. This book is set mainly backstage at a fictional West End theatre, and we've got if you like, a sort of washed up hack magician putting on a not particularly impressive magic show, but with a trick that takes place on stage during the show, which is completely inexplicable even by the magician. It's the appearance of a murdered corpse on stage during the performance, and that is, to my mind, that's the sort of central focus of the plot. That was the image that I had in my mind when I was first constructing it plot wise. Uh, it seemed ideal to me because obviously, as a lover of stage magic, uh, I um, I like the idea of um, having a fair play golden age puzzle, but using the framework of an actual magic show. It just seems like a perfect marriage of theme and setting and milieu, if you like. So Of course, Spector, my detective, is in the audience at this ill-fated magic show, and the plot develops from there. We get to learn about the sort of strange connections and relationships between all those interesting, eccentric characters backstage at the fictional Pomegranate Theatre, and yes, to me, it's also a tribute to as well as the locked room mystery, the theatrical murder mystery, which is a sort of subgenre, if you like. I mean, the likes of Nio Marsh, but also Agatha Christie wrote great mystery novels set within the world of theatre. I think just because, as well as illusion, there's that idea of performance and deception, which is something that's so fascinating because of the correlations to, day-to-day human interactions. It's interesting to look at them through the lens of performance and theatre. And of course, theatre also attracts a range of fascinating people, which is another key facet of Golden Age mysteries. They're colourful casts of characters and eccentrics.
Yeah, in the theater, you run into more varied personalities and eccentricities and weirdness, if I could go that far, than you would say at a group of dentists or accountants.
Exactly. But yeah, but it just holds a real fascination for me. Um, uh, Edmund Crispin, his first novel, Case of the Gilded Fly, that was a fun one. That was a great theatrical mystery. But I also like to discover more obscure titles that may not have um, that may not have reached the peak of popularity in the Golden Age that, say, Agatha Christie did. There are titles like, for instance, "Come to Paddington Fair" by a writer called Derek Smith, which he only published, I believe, one novel during the that was sort of Golden Age adjacent. I think it came out in 1953, and he wrote a sequel which remained unpublished until only a couple of years ago, I think. But that's a novel called "Come to Paddington Fair," and I particularly appreciate that one because that also has an impossible crime that takes place in front of an audience. So it's very much the magic show framework with the complex interactions and connections between the cast of characters that I enjoy, and of course Christiana Brand, Death of Jezebel. That's another great theatrical mystery where again we have an impossible crime which takes place on a stage mid performance. So I think of the Murder Wheel as being part of that sort of tradition, a kind of a tribute to that particular subgenre of impossible crime.
Yeah, there's something very charming and challenging about performing a murder in front of a group of people. But I think most murderers prefer to, have a little privacy when they're
Yes,
in their act. But
absolutely.
the Peter and Iris Duluth series by Patrick Quentin, they went for a dozen books or 14 books with, she was an actress and there they were. We've just had a revival in New York of the Demon Barber of
Yes, indeed. The
Sweeney Todd,
Sondheim show, yeah.
which was written by Hugh Wheeler, who was part of the Patrick Quentin authorship. He wrote with partners, various partners, but he
Yes.
wrote that series. He was a very accomplished mystery writer, in addition to being very famous on Broadway and winning Tonys.
Absolutely. No, Hugh Wheeler is, I think, a very important and probably underrated figure in studies of the Golden Age and things like that. I don't know if he necessarily gets the credit that he deserves, really, because the plots of the Patrick Quentin books are great, but also the style. They had a very distinctive style, which was I think was present from the very first book. Whereas when I think of Ellery Queen, obviously the Roman Hat mystery, again a theatrical mystery, where the crime takes place not on stage but in the audience during a play. But that's very much in the SS Van Dyne tradition, whereas and it took Danae and Lee that first couple of books to develop their own style with Ellery Queen to sort of emerge from the shadow of Van Dyne.
It
Whereas,
was more than a couple. I mean, I think the first 7 or 8 or 9 were
mm,
really Van Dyne like. Uh,
yeah, to me, the Roman Hat and the French Powder, they're the ones that I struggle with
yeah,
because of their Van Dyne, but then to me, the Dutch Shoe is the one where it's something seems to click into place for me as a reader, and it strikes me that is the first Ellery Queen, if you see
yeah.
what I'm getting at.
Jeff Marks, who's a great expert in the world of mystery fiction, wrote a biography of Craig Rice. Just popped us a note saying, don't forget there were a couple of Francis and Richard Lockridge books that had a theater setting too. I mean, Death on the Isle
That's on
being
the
the
aisle.
obvious title.
Yeah, absolutely. Yes. Yeah. But when you in your introduction you mentioned also biblio-mysteries, which is another subgenre that fascinates me. The murder wheel it's a locked room mystery, but I've tried to give it hints of the biblio-mystery. It begins with a mystery surrounding a book, for instance. A fictional book in this called The Master of Manipulation, which is as I say, it's a fictional book which, if you like, gives away all the secrets of various magicians, including the hack magician that I mentioned earlier, whose performance is interrupted by the appearance of a corpse. But the mysterious book in question has been published under a sort of ludicrous pseudonym, but as well as the image of the corpse appearing on stage during a magic show. Another focus of mine when I was first getting together the ideas for the book was a real life text called the I believe it's called, yes, The Expert at the Card Table, which is a real life book which was published in 1902, and it's still very much a definitive work on card manipulation, and it was published in 1902 as by S.W. Erdnase, which is again a ludicrous pseudonym. Nobody has ever managed to identify who it actually was. It's E.S. Andrews backwards, whether that means anything. But so what caught my attention was not only the content of the book, which is very interesting, very useful, very insightful, even today, even with the various developments in cardistry that there have been over the decades, but also this mystery surrounding the author. So, uh, so if you like, I was trying to channel some of that, the intrigue surrounding that book, the expert at the card table, into this fictional book, The Master of Manipulation, the publication of which sparked some of the mysterious events in the murder wheel.
Well, it's enough about magic. When I wrote the introduction to my big book of locked room mysteries, I did draw the analogy about magic. And one of the things that I said, and this is really self-defeating and a dreadful thing to ever write, I said, inevitably, you're going to be disappointed with every locked room mystery that you read, because it's like going to see a magic show where you have the awe of finding this amazing thing that's just happened that your eyes cannot explain to you. And the same with a locked room mystery, where you're reading it and it's impossible, and you're just in awe. And then when it's explained, there's always a little bit of a letdown, because it really wasn't impossible. It wasn't miraculous. There was a real honest to goodness explanation for it. So what I said, one of the things I said, and I think is true, is that your enjoyment from the book switches from awe to respect.
Yeah, that's a very good that's a very good point to make, and I agree with you completely. I've tried to have a bit of fun with that in the murder wheel, because there's some discussion about solutions to impossible crimes, and how they're inevitably to some degree a disappointment, because it's about lifting the veil of mystery. But when I talk about this kind of thing, I always find myself coming back to this idea of retrospective illumination, retrospective inevitability. That sense as a reader, when you are reaching the end of a murder mystery, and you reach that point where the secrets are explained, the identity of the criminal is revealed, etc. And effectively, you're seeing how you've been tricked by the author. And to me, that is a great sensation. That feeling of things falling into place. That kind of there's a satisfaction to that, of seeing a puzzle solved in front of you, and that feeling of course there was only one solution that it could possibly have been. But it was there in plain sight, but I didn't spot it, that kind of thing.
Right.
So to me, that's the satisfaction as a reader, and that's the kind of thing that obviously that's what I'm trying to create with the Spector books, and it's what I'm looking for when I'm reading an impossible crime story.
Was it reading so much Carr and presumably other Golden Age writers, particularly locked room mysteries, that inspired you to write this kind of book yourself?
Definitely. And it was also discovering really that I wasn't the only one that was fascinated by the Golden Age and by the impossible crime. I studied creative writing, having grown up reading Agatha Christie, and discovering John Dixon Carr, Ellery Queen, but also some of the other Golden Age greats, so people like Nicholas Blake. I also love Helen McCloy. Christiana Brand, I mentioned already, but then studying creative writing and looking at writing as a career. I mean, I did a lot of copywriting, ghostwriting, things like that on a freelance basis, whilst I was working full time as well. So that kind of thing saps a lot of the fun out of writing. And for me, it was coming back to the books that I'd enjoyed before I started writing seriously, that something kind of fell into place for me, and it just sort of came quite naturally to start writing, if you like, a pastiche of the Golden Age, writing in a kind of affectionate homage to that style, and to those plot structures and things that I've been immersing myself in, if you like.
I find it really comforting in a way that you bring up Christiana Brand, the forgotten genius of her time.
Absolutely.
You
Oh
know,
yes.
I think Boucher said, she ranks among the greatest of the great, putting her in the same league as Agatha Christie and John Dixon Carr.
Oh, definitely.
And very much forgotten. Most of her books are not in print. I think the British Library series is putting one or two of those into print, and I've had them
Yeah.
put them out as ebooks for
Mm,
some years. She was one of the great loves of my life.
mm,
She was my grandmother, although we had no blood connecting us, but we were friends forever. And she was so creative. She has some very good short stories as
mm.
well as her novels.
Absolutely. Yes.
And
100%.
and so many, and a lot of people, especially not young people, but people who have been around and are immersed in the mystery field, know her for the great film Green for Danger.
Green for Danger. Yes, I saw that when I was quite young. It used to get shown on British TV from time to time, and yes, it had to me, the scene that stuck with me, that there's a brilliant scene where one of the characters is sneaking around in the operating theater after dark, and the murderer is lurking for them in full surgical garb, complete with mask, and the whole thing is incredibly gothic and sinister.
Yeah,
And to me, that's also the something that's perhaps neglected in a lot of golden age pastiches that you read, that sense of the gothic and the sinister which you find in the likes of Carr, who obviously was influenced by Edgar Allan Poe, and that school of fiction. um, and I think that's something that Christiana Brand uh, um, uh, that's something that Green for Danger, the movie, really captures. But Green for Danger, the book, is fantastic. It's a perfect closed circle mystery,
yeah.
set in the field hospital during the Second World War.
And she did a very challenging thing. She listed a group of characters at the beginning and said, it's one of these. There
Yes,
there are other people who may show up from time to time, but you're going to ignore them. They didn't do it. It's one of
yes.
these.
Again, brilliant. Again, it comes back to this idea of the game that you play with the reader. You plant all the clues there, you plant all the information there from the very beginning, and you sort of defy the reader not to spot what you're up to.
We have one of our people who first of all said he bought the book today, but then followed up later saying, "Are you a magician, Tom?"
Ah, yes. Everybody asks me this, of course, which is inevitable, but the answer is sadly not. I don't have the leisure to man. I I've tried, but the problem is with card tricks that I'm just hopeless with the sleight of hand. I don't have it.
Well, I'd once hosted in my library, in my old bookshop. I hosted an evening for magicians, uh, people that I knew and I was friendly with, and the price of admission. I had drinks and champagne and dinner and stuff like that. The price of admission was that you had to do a magic trick,
Yeah,
and
I wouldn't have got in.
well, Levinson and Link, the creators of Columbo and Murder She Wrote, and Ellery Queen on television, they were
Mm,
both great fans and very knowledgeable about Golden Age mystery fiction, and they were amateur magicians as well. The Magic Castle, if you've ever heard of that, is just the most wonderful place for magic. So anyway, so they did a trick, and some other friends did a trick. Well, one of my guests was Harry Blackstone, and a very famous and great stage magician. And I said, and he said, I can't, I can't do a trick. I said, oh no, you're here tonight, and you have to do it. He said, I make an elephant disappear. And he did what you did. He held up his hands. He said, these won't do a trick. I said, no, you're not getting off the hook. I want you to do it. And he did, and he failed. And here's like this millionaire. This guy became a millionaire from his great trade shows, his, magic shows, and failed. He was so humiliated. He got up and went away from the office to the front of the store, and he was gone for like 5 or 10 minutes. So I went to look for him, and there he was practicing it so that he could do it. And he came back and he did it, which was so great. I was so embarrassed that I had embarrassed him, but
I love that. I think that's quite a telling anecdote, actually, because of course magic and illusion, they come in different forms, but really the one that interests me the most is the psychological tricks, the tricks where a sense of the supernatural, the uncanny is conjured up, and it seems that there's no real logical way that it can be explained. Now, Rim of the Pit, which I mentioned earlier, the Hake Talbot book, is an excellent example of that, because there you have a closed circle of characters that are they're out in the wilderness in these in this log cabin, which seems to be assailed by supernatural forces. And when you're reading it, it's the piling on of the tension it's like a horror story, you know. And it seems that there's no way that everything can be explained by rational earthly means, but of course it is. And I always, again, another title that I come back to a lot is The Hollow Man, aka The Three Coffins, a book which I don't know.
Show-offy book ever.
Yeah, exactly. Not a book that I would recommend as an introduction to John Dickson Carr. I think it's you need to be prepared for that book. You need to read a few other JDCs before you tackle The Hollow Man. But
for those of you tuning in who don't know this book, it is one of John Dickson Carr's Gideon Feld Impossible Crimes. And early on in the book, he fairly early, he gives a lecture to a group of people that he's with, explaining all of the ways that impossible crimes, locked room mysteries can be solved. And it goes on for about a dozen pages where he says, oh, and if this happens, then this is why, this is how it happened. And he's doing this with scores of really wonderful plots that most writers would give their eye teeth for a career to have. And when he's finished with all of these things, of all the ways that these locked rooms could be broken into and hidden and so all of that, he said, but in this case, it's none of those. He goes on to solve the crime.
Yeah, it's so brilliant, because that locked room lecture, it almost reads like a kind of an academic disassembly of the locked room genre. He's taking it apart piece by piece, but also it's an exercise in misdirection, essentially, because he leaves out the one crucial solution, which is relevant in the case of The Hollow Man. So really, the whole thing is effectively a sleight of hand trick, a literary sleight of hand trick. It's the equivalent of that handkerchief dangling out of the pocket. He knows that's he prepares the reader. He wants them to be looking for these tricks because he knows that none of them are there. It's something completely different. But really, the book as a whole is such an audacious thing because you've got this string of impossibilities, but also layers of impossibility. You've got a locked room, but the room is in a populated house. There are plenty of people around. There's a witness across the corridor who saw the hollow man step into the room with the victim and then disappear. You've got snowfall outside, so there are telltale footprints to be examined, but these don't lead anywhere. There are hints of the supernatural. You've got these three brothers, these three coffins, and this dark history that comes creeping back to the surface. And as you're reading it, you're just thinking, there's no way that Carr can pull it off. There's no way that he can unravel all of this in a satisfactory way. But to me, again, it's that retrospective inevitability when you get to the solution and you think, of course, it had to be that. There's only one way that all of this could be explained. Or at least that's what Carr manages to convince you as a reader.
Yeah. And you say, oh, yes, of course. That's the only way. But only after it's been told to you.
Exactly.
You never think, oh, of course, it must be that on your own.
That's it. That's the brilliance of it. And really, it boils down to a psychological trick. Golden Age writers all seem to have had their trick of choice that they would sort of fall back on, and that occur more than once in their works. Ellery Queen, I say he. Obviously, I'm talking about Danae and Lee, but Ellery Queen, they would sort of play around with the idea of the false solution. So they would effectively lay a string of clues throughout a novel that can effectively lead the reader along the garden path, if you like, towards a false solution to the puzzle, only for one of the clues to have been crucially misinterpreted, and for that clue to suddenly appear in its true sense, and that interpretation of it changing the whole shape and focus of the investigation. That's something that is done brilliantly in the Greek coffin mystery, for example. You've got this whole elaborately constructed false solution, and then one crucial little twist that derails the whole thing.
We're not done. We're not done yet. We still have a little time, but I did want to take a moment. Just we have a lot of people who have been making comments, so I just thought I would take a little break here just to thank everybody for writing to us. We have two people from Brazil, Raul Souza and Luciana Borges. Michael Dale. We have somebody from Great North Woods of Minnesota. Jim, hi Jim. You're a New Yorker. Jeff Marks, who has already written to us, I think is in Cincinnati. Here's another person. Same person. Sorry. Don C has been talking about lots of things. Dan Napolitano keeps writing silly things. He's a great John Dixon car collector.
Absolutely. I know Dan.
Collection. Do you know Dan? Have you heard? And
Yes.
I'm positive that he's bought both of your books and read them and enjoyed them. I'm sure he has.
I think he's in the acknowledgements, in fact, because I believe he read at least one of them before they came out.
I love his collection. He really is a very serious collector. And Don says, I love Rim of the Pit. And Jeff Marks mentions that Anthony Boucher summarizes John Dixon Carr's lecture in about locked rooms, obviously, in 9 times 9. Are you familiar with that, Tom?
Yes. That's one of the. I think there were only 2, but the Sister Ursula is his detective, the nun.
The Nun, yeah.
Yes, yeah. No, 9 times 9 is a great novel. I don't remember the talk about locked rooms, but I do remember the solution to that one, and it's a very fun one.
Okay. We're getting hellos from Josh Pector.
Oh, hi, Josh.
Yeah. Victor Bonini, also from Brazil.
Yes.
We have a huge following in Brazil.
There we go. Yes, lovely.
Henry from Toronto, Michael from New Jersey, the Garden State. That always cracks me up. You know, the most famous oxymoron in the world, New Jersey, the Garden State. You know, it's like jumbo shrimp and self-serve. Charles is tuned in. Charles Perry. Hi, Charles.
Oh, hi, Charles.
He's asking Tom, do you have a background in the theater? You seem to know so much about backstage stuff and all that.
That's that's a great question. I not as a performer, obviously. I'm not I'm not an actor. But I like with stage magic, I have got a fascination with the theater. And again, it goes back a long way to when I was first taken to the theater, and that kind of awe-inspiring atmosphere of it. And it gave me a desire to learn more about the, how it works, because theater and theater is really just illusion by another name. It's about the creation of a narrative in the audience's mind, and it's just fascinating to me to kind of unpick how those illusions on stage are created, and to just learn about the world of the stage. So while I've never been a performer, I do have a love of the theatre, and I do know quite a few people who are actors and performers, and they're just a constant source of fascination to me.
We do have somebody else who is mentioning a couple of locked room mysteries. This is Jeff from Australia. Hi, Jeff. He's pointing out that Fergus Hume wrote a couple of theatrical mysteries, and I wonder if you've read them, Tom.
No, I haven't.
And I know Fergus Hume's books fairly well, and I've never heard of that one. The Black Carnation also has theater background, which I knew, I remembered, but I've never read Across the Footlights. Is that a mystery novel, Jeff? Jeffrey, I don't know you well enough to call you Jeff, but I'll risk it anyway.
But yeah, no, not something I'm familiar with.
No, it's, and a lot of Fergus Hume. No offense to you, Jeffrey, but a lot of Fergus Hume is a tough go. It's a slog.
Which is not something you can say about Carr.
No.
He was always eminently readable. He had a great prose style.
Yeah, Jeffrey says yes. Across the Footlights is a rare one. I just scored a first edition of it. Of course you did. Good for you. Here's James from from Chicago saying hi, and Chris, who was in the UK, but who was in the shop last year and loved it, and he's looking forward to your to the Murder Wheel, which he hasn't. And yes, we know Nio Marsh. You got here late because she was already mentioned by Tom early, Chris. So
yes, there are so many.
Tune in early. Tune in. You don't want to miss anything.
No, there are so many theatrical ones in the Roderick Allen series.
Yeah, and for all of you writing in, and if I'm not getting to you, I'm sorry, but there's a lot of people here obviously wanting to see Tom, and I don't blame you. A little more entertaining than some people we've had over the years. No offense to anybody who's ever been on our show.
Well, thank you all very much. Yeah, it's and thanks to Otto as well for agreeing to do this.
Oh, it's my joy. We still have a few minutes, so
Wonderful. Yes. Okay. Well.
so let me. I'll ask a question if I may. What's your favorite locked room mystery of all time?
I don't want to say the Hollow Man because obviously we've talked about that a lot. The Red Widow Murders is definitely a good, definitely up there. Plague Court Murders is
That's the one
great
I
one.
was just going to say.
Yeah.
Great.
Probably that's the first of the Henry Merivale Carter Dixons.
Yeah.
That's up there for me. And again, it's got a very well. Again, I won't say too much, but it's got a very interesting theatrical clue in there, which I had a lot of fun with when I first read it. That was one of the ones for me. When that clue was explained, it was a great satisfactory kind of cathartic moment.
Yeah. I think Rim of the Pit ranks right up there near the top with all of the greatest locked room mysteries ever written.
Absolutely.
It took us a long time to get it into our American Mystery Classics series because we couldn't find the estate. We couldn't get permission to do it. It was really a challenge, but we did finally get it.
Yeah, it was worth the effort, I would say. I think people are going to love that one if they go into it knowing as little as possible about it. They're going to have a very pleasant surprise.
Yeah. Here's a great comment from a customer in Chicago who's enjoying you on this conversation. He said, "Now I'm going to have to perform the magic trick of ordering your book from the bookshop without my wife finding out."
Yes, absolutely. Yes, you must get hold of this book. I'll just show my copy there so that people can see the beautiful cover.
It's a good jacket.
Yes.
I love the jacket. There's a British edition with a different jacket. How do I get this?
Well,
the camera?
yes,
But
there it is.
And it's very good, but I like ours better.
Yes, absolutely. No, I've been very lucky with the jackets for these first two Spector books. The Japanese one was very fun. Yes, and the Russian one was very interesting. Not what I was expecting at all.
Their jackets. They're very different. But Japanese jackets are very different too from what we're used to. Here's a good question that I can answer, but you can answer at greater length, Tom.
Oh, okay.
Somebody saying, "Is there a third book coming?"
Yes, there is a third book coming. And in fact, I've been working on the edits for the manuscript today and will be for the rest of this week. The current title is Cabaret Macabre, which when I tell people the title, they seem to like it. So I think it's a fun title that captures the spirit of it. In the book, well, I won't say too much again. I don't want to give anything away, but I'll just give you a brief rundown of what it's about. Spector is he becomes embroiled in the fortunes of a very unpleasant family, the Drury family, who are being picked off one by one by a seemingly phantom killer. That's the setup, and there are a string of impossible crimes, but also identity tricks, the kind of crucially misinterpreted clues and all that kind of thing. So basically, like the first two books, it's a love letter to the Golden Age. I'm trying to capture some of that gothic and that kind of weirdness that we've talked about with the likes of Rim of the Pit, etc., and a lot of magic, of course.
Yeah, and it's more than one impossible crime.
Yes.
Which was true of Death and the Conjurer and the
Yes.
Murder Wheel. It's
Yes. Yeah.
it's hard enough to do one, Tom.
Well, the thing is, I always like to come up with something a bit different for each of them, as in, I don't want them all to be locked rooms in the conventional sense. I like to explore other types of impossible crime. So in Cabaret Macabre, for instance, we've got a murder victim who is found in a adrift in a rowing boat in the center of a frozen lake. So it's a different kind of locked room.
It's lovely. It's just
Yeah.
lovely.
So yeah.
Uh, yeah, and I've read this. I read this when it came in, so it's nice. It's a wonderful title. Several people have commented that it's a really good title. Here's our friend who said, "I'm going to have to read it in as an ebook because he lives in Bosnia and Herzegovina." So thanks for tuning in. Now,
Absolutely. Thank you so much.
you may be my only customer in that region. I'm not sure. And here's our friend in England asking, "Are you going to be doing a tour in the UK?"
In the
He's in the
UK,
north.
yes, when the second book, The Murder Wheel, obviously it's out in the US today, but the UK edition comes out in October. So when to coincide with that, I'm going to be doing a few bits and pieces. The first book has been nominated for a Capital Crime Award, which is given as part of the Capital Crime Festival down in London. That's at the end of August. So I'll be going to that, and I'll be promoting obviously the first book, but also The Murder Wheel. Then I'm going to be going to Bloody Scotland, which is a festival up in Stirling in Scotland. I'll be doing a panel there, and they are going to be selling some advanced copies of The Murder Wheel a couple of weeks before it comes out here in the UK. And then after that, I'll be doing various bits and bobs. I like to keep busy, and I like to meet people face to face. So definitely, I'll be coming to a bookshop near you.
Scotland's a little further north than Liverpool and Manchester, but
Yeah.
who knows where you're going to wind up, right?
Yep. No, I get everywhere.
That's great. So I think we have time for one more question. Dan is asking, how can we read your short stories? And I know about
Yeah.
Ellery Queen. Are they elsewhere?
Yes, I've written a number of short stories with Spector in them, and many of them are impossible crimes. Yes, there are, I think, 3 or 4 that have appeared in Ellery Queen. There's one in Alfred Hitchcock that was in the Alfred Hitchcock Mystery Magazine, and then a few at the very beginning when you were talking about Heatwave that appeared in the Lee Child Best Mysteries anthology. That was from a book published by Flame Tree Press here in the UK, and they issued a number of different anthologies that featured Spector stories. And they're all still readily available. But yeah, there isn't a collection or anything like that. But all the stories are out there.
Well, okay, not maybe too easy to find, but
no, they're all out there. And I've got on my author website, tommeadauthor.com, I've got a full list of them. So
okay. Who knows? They may be collected someday.
You never know.
You never know. Last question of the day. You'll have to do it fairly quickly. Is Spector British?
That's a great question. I'll say yes for now.
Okay. Okay. Well, I think that's going to do it for us tonight. Thank you all for tuning in. And Tom, it's just great. It's always great to talk to you. And really, I appreciate you taking the time.
No,
and
my
it was
pleasure.
great fun. Thanks
It
for
was.
thanks for being here.
And thank you all.
Thank you all for joining us.
Thanks,
Good
Otto.
night.
Good night.